So the rubber band helped his car? Oh, you're holding the cord in, I didn't see that. You say you Kevin told me I didn't count if I sat here. Oh, I was gonna say, we have one on the start. So I wanna see what he says the next person sits there. I wanna see what he says when I sit down. The problem with that is, you can't see. Yeah, but I never called them on that. Okay.
It gives you the chance to stand up and walk around.
Thank you. I've never used this before. Yep, and you expressed an interest. That's what you said.
I know this was with me on some stuff too. Are you interested in a small area forecast stuff? Pardon me? You interested in small area forecast stuff?
No, I didn't.
No, are you? Okay.
I don't know.
Did you talk to Craig?
Yeah.
Yeah, as you say, you actually volunteered.
Right, how it was done.
He was actually serving.
I can tell he's in the military.
Yeah, volunteer.
Don't play volunteer.
In the car or?
I heard that.
Came out from another meeting.
Sat in and after talking, it was 2 weeks ago.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order, please.
They're dropping onto this other version.
Okay, there will be a little bit of an adjustment, but we'll address that as we go with the change. And we do have a quorum. Hey, Hal. Although it was a skinny, and I thought it would be for the holidays, but I appreciate you all being here today. So in the consent agenda items, one of the things I wanted to do, it doesn't look like we have any visitors today, except for we want to welcome Rachel back in a different fold. So welcome back. Welcome back. And we're going to go ahead and move to the consent agenda items. And we've got the agenda and the minutes. And you'll notice the agenda has already been adjusted somewhat, but I'll let Bethany address that as we go through. And then membership appointment. The City of Fountain, Ms. Sharon Brown is an alternate, correct?
Was, and now she'll be the primary.
Now she's going to be the primary. Didn't they also have another alternate?
Philip Thomas will be the new alternate.
Okay. Who?
Philip Thomas, council member.
Philip Thomas. Okay, so my understanding is that we're going to be approving our agenda, our minutes, and these nominations from Fountain as well. Okay. Do I have a motion? There you go, Fran. And a second, please. And Michelle has a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thanks. Okay, as there are no other public type people out there, I think we may not have any public comments, but but are there any, do you all have, I always think this is a good opportunity, do you all have any comments from the people that you represent or you work with that you feel like you want to raise at this time? Things that you're hearing? Okay, then we'll go ahead and move on. Okay, Kevin, thank goodness, attended the board meeting for me. So, Kevin, if you'd like to just...
Yeah, I did attend the meeting. It ran, the executive session ran an hour, almost 90 minutes. So the board meeting didn't start until 10:30 or so. And so the instructions were, do not linger and do not talk very much. And so there was a lot of very hurried presentations and by staff and by everybody to try and get the meeting over with. They voted to adopt all of the things that we had voted on previously, except for one. there was substantial discussion around the note policy, and two of the TAC members got up and spoke against the continuation of the note policy. And I got up, because we're now, the way they order the PPACG agenda, the board agenda, is that the reports come after the items, the voting on items. And so the item was up before we could make our presentation or our comments. So I got up and said that we had also, in very quick fashion, I said we also had discussion about that. We had voted, though not unanimously, to adopt or to continue with the note policy, and I'll answer any questions. That was about all I said. The board had, though, some discussion about this, and they basically tabled the proposal and asked the TAC to please develop, and/or staff, I don't know who exactly had tasked with that, to develop the alternatives that were discussed, the CDOT, cash management proposal, and I think there was another one that the TAC had thought was workable. So the TAC was tasked with going back and bringing back to them a more detailed analysis of what the alternative would be if the note policy was to be modified. And so that was tabled. They basically, they skipped all of the presentations from all of the reports, reporting committees, and so I didn't get a chance to get up and talk about any of that, and so I left. And then afterwards, I understand that they voted to adopt the I-25 policy that we are going to be discussing, or might discuss today.
So resolution.
Resolution.
And I think Bethany or Jessica were going to raise that.
So
They did adopt.
they because the board has already acted on it, we will not be acting on it. I do have a copy of it for anyone who is interested in seeing that. The board did choose to endorse a resolution adding the I-25 gap improvements construction project between Monument and Castle Rock to the PPACG priority list and name it as the highest priority project for the Pikes Peak region. I'll pass these around so that if anybody wants to look at them, they can.
That's my report.
Great, thank you. Okay, any questions? Okay, thanks, Kevin. Okay, Kevin Reyes, let's see, number 5, the TIP amendment number 5.
Good afternoon, everyone. Kevin Reyes, Transportation Planner here with PPACG. So today I'm going to be going over TIP Amendment 5 for the 2017-2022 Transportation Improvement Program. Amendment number 5 comes to us from the Colorado Department of Transportation as well as the City of Colorado Springs. These two entities are proposing to construct an extended detention basin along the US 24. I can show you exactly where they're going to be proposing that. So here we have the US 24, and they're proposing to construct a detention basin right here to help reduce the amount of water that is going into the Fountain Creek during events of lots of rain. And the reason for this extended detention basin, as I understand it, is ever since the Waldo Canyon fire, this area has experienced significant flooding. So this detention basin will help mitigate that. And they're also proposing to construct two 36-inch wide culverts under US 24 to help feed into the basin. So for funding, CDOT is proposing to spend $2,750,000 in fiscal year 2017, and the City of Colorado Springs is planning to put $160,000 of in-kind in fiscal year 2017 as well. And so, yeah, that's really everything for TIP Amendment number 5. I can take any questions on that.
Go ahead, Al.
So that we can see exactly where that is.
Yeah. So here's the US.
No man's land.
Well, what's the major street there crossing?
So this is the US 24,
West Colorado is just to the north.
and then, yeah.
Ridge Road to the right.
Mhm.
Ridge Road is the entrance on that side, 24, into Colorado Avenue going into the Gardner Pass.
Right.
Mhm.
There's no light there, but there's a left turn lane coming eastbound
There is no light at either Highway 24 at Ridge or at Ridge in West Colorado.
Correct.
Now, with the West Side Avenue Action Plan, there actually will be, we're going to be putting in a light at Ridge Road in West Colorado, farther down where the Buffalo Lodge sign is. But now, if I understand right, too, part of the reason why the culverts and to get water underneath is because they have flooding on the south side as well as also some water, I believe, on Highway 24.
Yeah, exactly.
Al?
Is there a date for certain that this is going to get accomplished?
I believe they're hoping to have everything done in 2018, if I can recall correctly. I don't have the timeline with me, but yeah, I think the plan is to have it more or less finished by I think it was May of 2018.
I think the culverts should be, are they going to drill underneath the highway?
I'm not exactly sure how they're going to be doing that, but in this scope of work, I didn't read anything about them having to close down the road or anything like that.
What is the overall driver of this project? Is this part of the stormwater runoff, or is it caused because of erosion or other issues around this area? What's the actual driver for doing this?
My understanding is the Waldo Canyon fire has created quite a bit of erosion, and so which has caused a lot more flooding. So I think that's been a big driver for this. There's a property right in here, the Timber Lodge. Apparently this property has been flooded several times since that fire.
But this is considered a transportation project as opposed to
This yes. Any
action or something?
any federal funds that we receive, they have to go into the tip, and so this would be considered a transportation project as well.
It's a transportation issue for us, but it's also a mitigation to
Exactly, yeah.
nearby properties. So. Any other questions? Okay, can I have a motion to approve, please?
Second, Lon Clark.
Okay. All right, great. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
All righty, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Jennifer?
She's got it.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Valentine, Transportation Planner with PPACG. So in the memo associated with this item, Agenda Item 6, you should have a list of the 13 goals that were approved as part of the 2040 Long Range Transportation Plan. So that's our, actually I guess currently adopted, most recent Long Range Plan. So what we're proposing to do is to release these 13 goals for public comment. So a couple of things. We decided to start with this set of goals because we feel like they've been very well vetted. We actually did an exercise, I was telling the TAC, we printed out the goals from the 2030 plan, 2035, 2035 update, and 2040, and we put them all in little piles on the table to see how much overlap there was between the plans. And fortunately, most of the piles had several things in them. There weren't really many outliers, so there was a lot of overlap. So we felt good about that there's been kind of that continuity between the last few plans. And we also just thought it made sense to start with the most recently approved list. So as I noted on the second page of the memo, the only two real outliers we had were, in the past, there was a goal specifically related to alternative modes that for whatever reason didn't make the cut last time around. But we've already been hearing from people, public, committee members, and even internally with staff that that's something that at least some people would like to see back in the mix. So that's on our minds. So the way we're planning to get these goals out to the public is with some survey that we'll be putting out early next year. We've been working a lot with Jessica and Jenny, our new communications staff, to think about how we can reach a wider audience, kind of like I started talking about with the public participation plan. So this survey would really give people an opportunity to comment on these 13 goals and also to see if we missed anything, just kind of that blank, and then we'll see if there are some common themes that we start seeing from the input that we receive. So the TAC did recommend these for release at their last meeting, and that's what we are requesting from this committee.
Okay, Fran?
Yeah, just a comment, is the air quality conformity taken off? Instead of archiving and getting rid of it, you might want to just consider, even though you've made it for the last couple decades, making an objective under goal number 13, so it's not out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, definitely, and that was one of the questions from actually Brian Batuli at the one of the TAC members, and I noted that the thing that was taken out was the related to federal emissions standards, and because us being in an attainment area, but that number 13 obviously is still related to emissions. It's just not specific to the federal requirement, but definitely noted.
Yes, Kim?
A couple comments. One, in number 3, it talks about projects and programs that have the highest life cycle cost effectiveness. Is that our highest priority now? I thought we went through a drill last year that.
Where we prioritized.
That sort of modified that whole, that's our number 1 priority is life cycle cost. What's that?
That's actually bottom
What's the bottom line? Oh, you mean the life cycle cost?
Yeah, as far as weighting.
So then why do we propose to send out a goal that's prioritizing something that's not our priority?
Is this actually a prioritization list, or is it just a list of things?
Yeah, number 1 is not the most important thing. Number 13 is not the least important thing.
But if life cycle cost effectiveness is now in our lower half of what we consider to be the important stuff, it says here that we are prioritizing those kind of projects. I don't know that that's a legitimate.
So
That makes sense.
one other thing I should mention, I forgot this before. So our plan was to take these 13 goals out to the public, get their input, then come back to the committees probably in February and have this kind of, not to say that your comments aren't welcome now, but to have this kind of wordsmithing, telling us what you all think. So you definitely will have that opportunity, just to be clear.
But if we go out to the public and we're effective at getting public input,
Right.
it seems to me like we ought to have things that prompt their thinking. And so I would propose that there are 2 or 3 things that we've talked about here that are not in this list of goals.
Okay.
One is, how do we deal with new technologies like driverless cars, and, over the period of time, shouldn't our plan address that? I know that some of the other regional folks have done that. And so I think that we should have at least a prompting sort of thinking about, when you go out to the public, we're thinking about this, what do you think about that? So I'd like to add that. I'd also like to talk a little, I don't know where it is in here, but I'd like to talk about protecting and enhancing opportunities for all transit options. We've talked about over the next 4 years, is it possible that we might have a light rail type transit system? Is it just going to be all tired transit options? Can we do something that makes them think that we might, as a goal or as an objective in the planning process, that we might
Look at
think about
Master.
those things?
Makes a lot of
So
sense.
those are two ideas that I think I'd like to add to the list that goes out, so that people can think about that and comment on that, or say that we think that's stupid or not stupid.
Yeah, so one thought about that. I wonder if we could release this as the current or currently approved list. And then, like I said, it's a survey, so it's not just going to be, here's the 13, what do you think? We have the opportunity to ask other questions and to get different types of feedback. So maybe early next year, we can come to you all to get feedback about the survey itself, if that fits into the timeline, if there are other types of questions, but still sort of keep this as, here's what we have right now. Does that make sense?
And let me just clarify that.
Okay.
Is this a draft, or is this final, what's going out to the public?
These are the current adopted goals for the current plan.
Okay. and these have been adopted by
The board of directors.
the board.
As part of the
So it's a
2040
done deal.
plan.
But they were adopted 5 years ago. Or six.
They were finalized a year ago.
Okay.
With the plan.
Okay. Rachel?
I have a couple of questions, and one of them's along that line. When were these first developed?
Well, that goes back to what I was saying with the piles on the table. I mean, most of the ideas for these goals have been around for 16, 20 years and have been, changes in words here or there, but there aren't really many that weren't in those piles. So they've been around for a long time.
It seems like, some of these certainly seem perennial, but if a lot of these are 16 years old, it seems to me this is a good time to maybe start fresh. And, I agree with Kevin that I think it's important to know what are we asking the public? Because once we put these 13 out there, that frames the conversation. And it's going to frame the way that people think, and that's going to alter the input that we get. And certainly, things have changed in transportation in the last 16 years, things like Kevin mentioned, in terms of technology. And more surveys that I'm seeing in various contexts, like the comp plan, we saw it in the last tip that we put out for public comment. People are really emphasizing public transportation options, and so to not even have a goal initially proposed on that, I think is a mistake.
One of the federal requirements is that we do a continuous transportation planning process, which means you start from where you left off. So that's why we start with the adopted goals. For the between the two 2035 plans, we went from 7 goals to 17 goals, or 9 goals to 17 goals. Yeah, 9 transportation. That was based on the additional input we got from the other agencies that we outreach to. But you still start with this, the previous plans goals. To get to the 13 we have now, then went from the 17 to the 13. But you build on what was in the past as part of the continuous process.
That's quite accurate, though, because if these goals were made 16 years ago, then that was a starting point. These haven't been around since the dawn of time. And the federal regulations do say a continuous program, but I don't think anywhere does it say you have to start with the previous goal.
It doesn't dictate that, but that is generally the evaluation criteria that Federal Highway uses when they certify us.
I'm just curious.
So
Is that if you were starting from scratch, would you, let me rephrase that. If you wanted to get the public's input on things that they believe are important, does it seem like a good idea to put out the same ones that have been around as opposed to ideas that you see that they may not see yet as options for the future?
can you ask that a different way?
Well, actually, can I try answering it? So that was part of the reason that we wanted to start with this list. And you can say, okay, oh, these have been around forever. They're not relevant anymore. Well, every single plan cycle, there has been extensive discussion about this list of goals. So the fact that there actually was continuity between them is a small miracle. But part of the thing is to put out these goals, but then also have that fill in the blank. Is there anything that we missed? So fine, if they don't like any of these 13 goals, they can put in 13 of their own, but we want feedback on what have been the core set of goals for a long time. They can put an X to each one if they want to, but we want to know what they think about these.
I'm just curious as to how you frame the discussion with the public. Do you say, these are goals that have been around since, X and have been consistently worked on? What are your thoughts now? Or do you say, these are the goals we have approved and identified, and what are your thoughts? Because one implies that you all want to head in this direction, and the other implies that you want something new.
So I actually have the answer to that because policy and communications has been working with them. So what we are proposing is we're going to create a survey that says, in the past, these have been identified as issues. Tell us whether you think they are still important or not. We're asking in each section, because they're going to have probably 3 or 4 of these in each set of 5 questions, and for them, what are we missing? What isn't here? What do you see in the future? so that those questions, we ask them repetitively. What else should we be thinking about? So that we're not just looking to hear their opinion on these 13, and we want to make that very clear to them. That is part of our survey process. And then the goal on that will be to make sure that we are hearing more than the 13, but making sure that we know if any of these can be knocked off the list because they're no longer pertinent.
Getting to what Kevin and Rachel were saying, absolutely. I know. In addition to what you just said, think about the future, think about technology, think about, it gives them something to, oh, yeah, because they'll look at this and go, it's probably good enough.
And that's,
Unless you actually
I'm
give
not
them
missing,
something.
they're not missing anything.
that is what the survey starts with, is an explanation of how and why this matters and how we're not looking for today, we're looking for the future. So it's,
Hal?
I think anytime you get a list of goals, it's, you can have a lot of discussion on what should be added, what should not be added, but what's here needs to be accurate. The goal number 3 is not accurate. I have a problem with that. It is not to prioritize projects with the highest life cycle cost. That's not what the priority is. It's more complex than that, and that's what, in the bottom 3, in the bottom third as far as the actual decision criteria. So having that phrased the way it is isn't an accurate statement. Am I incorrect in that? I'm trying to make sure I understand.
See what you're trying to accomplish. Rachel, just let me get Vince input here.
You're going to send this out to the world. How many people do you figure are going to look at this and provide a response to?
Jessica, what do you think?
Is that a tough question?
it is a tough question because it can depend greatly on season and holidays and things like that. I anticipate that we will get somewhere between 50 and 200 responses, hopefully with a good representation of our community.
Another question would be, that's probably pretty high, I think. Other planning areas, what are the goals that they use? Have you looked at their goals and compared them to our goals? I know our goals are ours and theirs are theirs, but it seems like we're all trying to achieve the same thing wherever we might be. So how different are theirs than ours?
Do you mean other MPOs or planning entities? I think there's going to be a lot of overlap because they're at least loosely based on federal performance requirements. Ultimately, we're going to connect the beginning and the end of our plan, and so we have to show that progress towards meeting those, federal performance measures. But the very first thing is hearing from the community what they want, what they think is important, and then tying those things together with our projects.
I'm just saying there's all the inputs that are out there. It might be good to look at all of those and put those on the table and see if there's anything. And the last item, I'm not sure that everybody would understand these sentences the same way. It would seem to me that you would want to put some description or some narrative or something about each one of those out there so that when they read this, it says this, for example, incentivize infill in and redevelopment of existing communities. I'm not sure how that ties to transportation. Maybe you only build roads where people are infill, So if you explain what you really mean, I think they could better interpret your goals.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion, and I think it's also possible that this is not the exact wording that might go out. It might be paraphrased. It might be explained in another way to get the best possible understanding and feedback from the public. These are just the ideas. That makes sense to have the actual phrase from the 2040 plan. We haven't gotten that far in actually designing the survey, but that's a really good point.
Rachel, you had something, then Ray?
I think Jennifer made a good point, an important point earlier, and I'm a little unclear on what the goal is. I think you said something like, we're not asking what the goals are, we're asking what people think of these goals. And I think that's an important distinction that we're hitting on here. Do we want to go ask the public, what are your goals for the transportation system? Or are we just going to say, what do you think of these goals that we already have?
Well, I think Jessica already answered that. I mean, it's intended to be open-ended. We want feedback on these goals because they provide an already approved, I don't want to say already approved, they provide a starting point, a jumping-off point, but the main idea is always just to get the public's feedback on what are their goals. But if we just say, hey, what are your goals, we're going to get a bunch of stuff that we can't really process, you know what I mean? It's just going to be all over the place. We have to have something to frame the conversation.
I wouldn't make that assumption that if it were open-ended questions, that you would get junk feedback.
I didn't say we were going to get junk feedback. I said we wouldn't have any way to categorize it. We would have thousands of responses that then we have to use the entire floor and cut those out and put those in files. At least if we start with something somewhat established, it frames the conversation.
I think themes would be really important when you have open-ended comments like that, particularly if you get a large enough volume. I mean, we've certainly seen it before. Again, back at the last hit that we did, the theme, sure, there was some outliers, but the theme was more multimodal options, just as an example.
Ray, you had a comment?
Well, I like what Kevin and Rachel said. You got to get different feedback from the public. You've got to get them to give you what their true goals are. You can, I understand your wording, and if you're going to word it where it's not like a normal survey where I'm told to do this, and I've got to stay in my fence, and it's got to be done exactly. I just took one the other day, one of our PPACG, but everything's already there for me to fill out. I get to click a button, and that's all I did. But what you're going to have to get the input, we got to get more than 200 people. It's not their responsibility to get the input from the people. It's this people in this room. You have to do something. I've got a Woodland Park community page, 5,000 people on it. She knows it. And when we did that survey the other day, I sent it out to them and I said, fill this out. And I says, we've got 5,000 plus people on here now. And if you took the time to read my paragraph, you have enough time to take this survey because it's a very short survey. So my comment now, how many people is going to take it? I don't know. I hope more, but it's my job to get on that Facebook page and look at the other crap that's on there and go through all that and weed through the weeds and then put it out there. So when you send this out, as soon as I get it, it will be copied and pasted for those 5,000 people to see. Now, I don't expect them to go to our website. They're not going to do it. No one else is going to do it in the local area. So I've got to find a way of doing it because I'm the community representative for Woodland Park. And me and Helen both have access to that page, and we support each other when it comes to making comments on it, get people's input, because most of Teller County, just because it says Woodland Park, there's a lot of people in Teller County that's on it. So my comment is I support what you're saying 100%. I think we've got to get different goals than these, but we've got to find out how we're going to do it. You've got to have a starting point, but we are the ones that's got to get it out to the public. We've got to figure out a way to get it out there.
That's a good point, Ray. Courtney?
I'm kind of going to echo Kevin and Rachel a bit. I mean, I think when you build a sandbox, people will play in the sandbox, and when you give them a beach, the sand castles are a lot better. And so I wonder if there's a way to set up the survey, and I saw it with the Plan COS initial visioning process, but it's inputting words that you think of. And so starting the survey with blank slate, what do you want to see in Colorado Springs, and do a word cloud or do something simple to aggregate some of that, and then follow that with the goals that we have, so that you don't start with the sandbox already built and get some, you can do both, I guess, is the point.
Well, that would be my question for all of you who don't seem to like this idea. If we just had it completely open-ended, is there a problem with acknowledging that these are the goals from the last plan, or nobody wants the sandbox, we all want a beach? That's what I need to understand, because it's a very different strategy.
It is. And I guess my feeling is if to go totally open-ended might be tough for some people, and it would be tough for a lot of the people I deal with. But I think having these are former goals. And with what you know of technology, our community's growth, and I think framing it about what's happening in our community, in all of our areas, then what are your feelings and what can you add to this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's value in giving people something to respond to, because most people out there are not planners and they don't really think about this stuff most of the time.
I know, and I guess what, and I'll just reference somebody else's comment. We got to be sure that we are. I'm not sure everybody understands infill. I'm not sure everybody understands. There are a couple other words in here that I went.
Life
That I
cycle,
thought you
right.
might want to make sure there's an adequate description, because, I mean, when we talk transportation all the time, it becomes part of your lingo, especially you guys, because my first year was trying to figure out the lingo. But, and explaining those helps people understand your comment. Okay, you had another comment over here?
Well, forgive me for this, but I'm going to go back to number 3, because I don't think it's written accurately. Therefore, I think that goal needs to reflect an accurate statement, or it needs to not say prioritize, because that is not the way that projects are prioritized right now.
Well, I would disagree. These are actually the approved goals by the PPACG board. So as written, they are accurate and correct. What Kevin brought up earlier was the fact that our weighting criteria has changed regarding the life cycle cost effectiveness item.
Right, the
But
methodology has
That's not the same
changed.
thing as the goal. That's the weighting criteria. And those things change every year when we go through the evaluation of the weighting criteria. So I don't think it's accurate to say that these goals aren't accurate. They clearly are, because they're the last ones that were approved by the board. Now, as part of our other processes that we go through, we've changed the weighting criteria we use and the priority of those. It's fair to say that this is a goal of the organization. It doesn't mean it's the primary goal. It's a goal. All 13 are a goal, equally across as goals. When we go into scoring projects, that's when the weighting criteria comes into effect and alters each project's priority in the list.
These things are, okay, can I accept that? Probably, it's true, I'm sure, but it's slippery slope when you have something that specifically states that that's the priority.
It doesn't
And
say
the
it's.
weighting criteria is not that way. I'm just,
I think what we've done is give Jennifer enough ammunition and
sorry.
Jessica, no, to frame the conversation. Frame the conversation so you get the public's input that becomes a valuable asset to you all recrafting the next goals. Al?
I think that there's a way to prompt the openness, and it's to prompt them through questions. You know, what do you think about technology? How would it affect that? What about multimodal, if they understand? It took me 3 years to figure out what infill was, and I'm still not sure. So, you're going to go, yeah, sure. You know what I'm saying? I just think you can make these sound easier to the regular people, and to
Right, especially
and
to
to
the loud
push
public.
them, tap them a little bit about the questions that we know that we should ask.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. No change to this.
I second that.
And forgive me, I don't know if Ellen or Wellington were first.
This is kind of a regard of how to put this out to how citizens would read it.
Yep.
If I'm a citizen and I'm reading, it says, these are the approved goals, and they're going out for comment, it's like, why am I, if they're already approved, why is it, I'm just thinking what a citizen would say. I'd say, and the approved long-range goals are, instead of saying approved, could we say something like proposed goals are, or something
Or
like that?
formerly.
Oh, they've been around.
Or the former goals are like this, and then say, and what has changed, this is what we've done in the past, kind of like what Jennifer said, what are we missing in the future?
Yeah, and so the way that a memo to our committee is framed is definitely going to be different than the way we would put these out to the public. And so we're taking in all of these comments. They're all really useful. But it was never the intention to say, because the public gets that all the time, right? Here's our plan. What do you think of it? I mean, it's actually already done, but what do you think? And the reason we're doing this at the beginning of the process is because we don't want it to be like that. So we just need to be clear that that's the case.
It's just the wordage as of when the citizens say it's approved, it's quote, done deal, that's
Right.
pop in their head. So you say, these are ones of the past, and we're looking to incorporate them in the long run. I think you got everything right there with what Jessica said, too, and what the comments have done here. Maybe some examples of new ones, like what Kevin brought up. But that went out there. Here's an example. What can you think of?
And I think also if we emphasize that this is the foundation of the plan. We're at the beginning of the process, so it's really clear that it's not done. It's just starting.
Okay, one more comment, Ellen?
Yes, two brief ones. One, thanks again for yet another insightful, informed, concise, cognitive exchange. Once again, proving that the dynamic is important, and I'm really pleased to sit and listen. I'm trying not to smile too broadly. It's not a private joke. It's just awesome to be with all of you and hear this exchange. It's exactly why this body exists and what we're supposed to be doing from my point of view. And second, as much energy as we have just put into discussing this, could we figure out ways to get it out in front of the public? The very notion that 2, 12, 50, or 200 people only will respond is inappropriate. In a community as diverse as the Pikes Peak region, with the pressures on it, with current issues and future growth, it's irresponsible of our community not to respond. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Will the survey be up on the PPACG site as a survey? Is that part of the plan?
I think the idea is to have it available in as many places as possible. We would look to our member entities to link to it from their sites. We're working on some of that exchange, tweeting some of their stuff, having us tweet theirs, so available online, always paper copies. But yeah, link to it from as many places as we can.
I think what we need to do is make some effort as an organization to get this out to the people. So we will
Yeah.
try.
I have just one thing. One of the things that we learned when you put goals up in a format like that, I don't care how you change it, how you reword it, what you're going to do, when you put one, that's number one.
Mm-hmm.
So ABC,
Okay.
I'm just messing with your bullet dots, but when you put a one there as a public, that's number one.
Just quick, is it possible to get these on the member entity websites so that it goes out to a lot more people and a lot more people see rather than PPACG, like Colorado Springs and Monument?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely the idea.
I mean, I'll forward your output information to Connell and all the neighborhoods, try to disseminate it from that side of the house.
Great.
If we get a direct, if we get sent out a direct link to the survey, then I will
Then I
copy
will,
and paste it
direct link is the
to
fastest
everything
for
and
me, too.
anything I can get stuck to.
Yeah, and I'll probably mention this a million times before this plan is over, but we're really, really trying to work with City of Colorado Springs because they have their comprehensive plan update going on right now. We don't want conflicting information, and we want to work together on public process so we can reach some of the same people, but without burnout. It's a fine line, but we're going to try to make it happen.
Okay, like I said, I think we've given her a lot of food for thought, so.
So we're supposed to.
So as baptisms go, how was this one?
Excellent.
Okay, I think we need to approve it for public comment then?
That's what we're asking for.
Okay, with all the above. Okay, could I have a motion, please?
I make a motion that we approve it with the stipulations that we talked about.
Second? All those in favor?
What are we voting on?
We're just, the stipulations.
We're voting
are-
on,
Let's specify.
The stipulations was the way they're going to word it to meet the needs of what we believe that it should say. Instead of making a public person look at some of the wording in here and not understand it, or instead of a public person, one of our public persons, looking at it and thinking these are the only goals. They have to make it look like this is previous goals that have been approved in the past. Can you give us some insight on yours? They're going to have to do something with that, because I don't want it to go forward just these goals, because most people read these goals and are not going to understand it. So you did agree to making it this is past practices, past goals that have been approved, or something to that effect.
so framing the conversation.
Framing the
with some of
conversation that when these go out.
Go ahead, Kev.
A question, who is this motion going to? Is this going to?
It's going to this body right now. Oh. It's our input.
All we need is a second now.
For, right, did I get a second, Ellen? Yeah, that's what I thought. We have a second, so we're in discussion.
And you have the right to vote against it, but that's not, I could, yeah, okay. That's
Okay,
important. I like that.
Did you want to change the wording at all? Stipulations or input on framing, or stipulations is pretty specific.
I make a motion that we approve the goals that as past goals, and we need their input. I'm not sure how to word it to get it away from stipulations.
That's right. We'll frame that. Okay, and we did have a second. You okay with that? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
How Moffett?
Okay, how many nays?
3.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I know. I feel the same way as Ellen. I appreciate what the group has to offer and what bring to the table as far as clarification for the people we represent. Okay, we're going to move on. Craig.
It's just briefly, we did develop a new resolution. It is a modification of the one you saw last month. What the primary changes to it are less specificity in widening and more in improvements, because what we found out as we go through it is there's a whole lot that needs to be done on that road beyond just adding a lane. Shoulders need some work, drainage needs some work. The condition of the road is not necessarily great. So instead of saying road widening, it's improvement project that includes safety, maintenance, and capacity. That's the primary changes to it. So.
And this was already approved by the board.
Yep. So, any questions?
Craig, I'm hoping for a little clarification here. Roughly 2 days ago, CDOT put out a little press release that the media on the Front Range picked up regarding a 10-year plan for this
Right.
particular stretch of highway, and a 10-year study culminating, starting with the study, culminating with the work to be done. So that's
Right.
an indication that the media picked up on that would take roughly 10 years to get improvements. And you can hear them moaning.
Well-
Walsenburg up to the Wyoming line.
Okay, so right now, the PEL, Planning Environmental Linkages Study, is going to take about 18 months. There's really no way to speed that up. It's an interstate. Even if we were trying to fund it with local dollars, it's an interstate. You have to go through the federal process. After that 18-month study, there will be, best case, an 18-month environmental process. Worst case, a 72-month environmental process. After that environmental process is done, then you can start construction. Some of the issues, because there's a myriad of issues, actually capacity for the road is generally acceptable by federal measures. There are some crash issues, and because of the shoulders, there's crashes and there's some congestion caused by crashes. An interesting point is Saturdays, weekends are the worst. Weekends have about 80 to 85% of the traffic volume of weekdays. What you get is high peaking, so the road is, everybody's trying to drive on the road at the same time, where if you spread it out, the congestion isn't that bad. You don't build for a significant peak. You don't build a road for a significant peak like that. Also, they looked at crashes, and there's crashes in a couple specific locations. There are some culverts that are 90% filled with silt, and so that there's the bad drainage, and that's what's causing some of the crashes. So there's some maintenance issues there that relate. The shoulders are substandard. There's a wildlife preserve that is right up against the fencing. So the direction that they would like to widen, which I think is to the west, is actually the one that's least likely to happen because of environmental concerns and other things. So there's a whole myriad of things that are going on in this project. Yeah.
In the study process, how much attention will they be giving to the wildlife aspect? Not because I'm a tree hugger, although some would say I am, but because of the number of accidents related to wildlife.
Significant. Yeah, there is. There's a.
Huge number.
Yep. Yes, there is. Also, one of the is because it's protected view sheds and making it maintaining the look and not turning it into an urban interstate through a wildlife area, trying to keep it as a rural appearing road is a concern. Another concern is that road, the road base, is actually 40-plus years old. It needs full-depth reconstruction. That's why, if you've heard the most recent cost estimates, $570 million. Wow. We don't have to come up with $200 million, we have to come up with $500 million, because they're not going to add a lane onto a project and then have to go back in 3 to 5 years and do it again. And along the funding issues, there is no money for this project identified anywhere right now in any plan. Dr. Cog, this is only 1.5 miles of the 17 miles is in our region. Douglas County got their project in the Dr. Cog process. The other entities in Dr. Cog are waiting their turn. They are unlikely to give up their money to give it to Douglas County for the I-25 project. So what we're going to need is a new funding source. That's the best way to say that.
Okay, Vince?
Yeah, do you think some action could occur in the second half of January that could expedite that process?
Not much, no. No, honestly, the absolute fastest you're going to get any of that process, the environmental and design process, is 40 months.
If the process is changed so that it's,
You're not going to change. No, you're not. NEPA is not going to get repealed.
no, it can be.
No, it is already. It used